Well, hello, everybody. I think it's pretty much all my friends, so I don't know if I'm going to have to do a lot of before the scenes introducing of myself and my credentials for giving a talk on virtually anything. But let's see. Okay, very good. So can everybody see that slide there really clearly at home?
I can see it.
I can see it.
Okay,
I can see it.
What does it say?
An ancient tree pierces the indigo sky, awakening of the real world of nature. Andrew Barker, November 20th, 2022.
Thank you, Jack. Jack is our host for today. So, you know, it's funny. We were talking about this on our Thursday night group, and when somebody read that title, I said, "My goodness, that is probably the most pretentious title I've ever heard for a talk." And then I was reminded that Dora Kuntz used to say, "I didn't know anything about doing promotions or talks, the preliminary things for talks." And I thought, well, that might actually be sort of a talent, because then you get the real essence. I mean, anybody can make a really popular, a title, like a really sexy title that gets a lot of people in. But how about making one that really makes people go, "Gee, do I really want to go to that or not?" And I think I succeeded. So anyway, today we are going to be talking about the real world of nature. I'm going to be talking a little bit about plants. And actually in depth, we're doing all of the three aspects of the second object, which are science, philosophy, and religion. We're going to have it all covered today. So second object, we got it real good. Probably heavy on science at first, and then going more towards the philosophical side as we go along. So anyway, let's get going. So I thought I'd put this up. This was our topic for this morning, and I just found the slide, and I thought I'd show William, who was our leader for that. Happiness is the absence of striving for happiness. Zhuangzi. And that was what we talked about this morning, all about happiness, and a very interesting talk. We'll probably be getting into that a little later on here. So everybody's familiar with the famous William Blake, "To see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour." So it's a very non-dual thing to come up from that era. Mark could probably say exactly when that was. I don't know the exact date, but it was 1700s. So without the benefit of much exposure to Eastern religion or that sort of thing, it's a very mystical thing to be saying. So we'll be looking a little bit about how this how the world of nature and our own world, the human world, you might say, how they intersect and influence each other. So here, probably everybody has seen dandelions. These are all pictures that I took myself. So what I find interesting about dandelions is the fact that they can look like the thing on the left and they can look like the thing on the right. And actually the same plant will look like both things. It's really cool. It has a lot of, I think it has some kind of implications for life in general, how mutable and changeable life can be. Humans talk about, shapeshifters and shamans and all these kinds of shading short. It's just no big deal for plants. They do it all the time. So thinking about how these forms change and finding out for ourselves how we ourselves change in similar ways. There's the old adage about the butterfly, the chrysalis, and the butterfly, the worm, caterpillar? Yeah, chrysalis, caterpillar, butterfly. They're all forms of the same creature. And in a sense, humans do something similar as we go through our lives. Many of us have had, interesting periods in our lives that we barely survived. And through that, there was a change. We cast away our chrysalis, a way of seeing the world, and broke free into a new sort of freedom. So this is the root of a dandelion. Just so you see how far down they go. And you saw the picture in the beginning, the picture before that. Look how far down that goes. Way down into the soil. So that's why they can grow in like concrete. They can grow in really dry, almost desert-like conditions, because they're going down to find water wherever it is. And in a similar way, we can do this when we're having a hard time going down deep into our own roots and finding that nourishment or water or sustenance deeper inside of us. So this is a plant pal. And you guys probably thought ladybugs are just kind of cute and pretty, but they're actually ferocious. And the reason why they're plant pals is because they eat aphids. They love aphids. And they can eat their weight in aphids really quickly. So they're really nice. They're a friend for plants and people who like plants.
What's an aphid? What's an aphid?
Aphid.
Yeah.
Aphid is a little creature that sucks the juice out of plants.
Those are tiny little spiders.
What's that?
Look at tiny little spiders.
Yeah, sort of like that. And so again, this is a cool picture that I took. I took a whole bunch of these, and I did have some nice videos, but I didn't want to mess with it. But here's some hummingbirds, and that's taken with a cell phone, which shows you how close the hummingbirds, how much they cared about the fact that I was there. I was practically hitting them. I mean, they're practically hitting my phone. They really wanted that, what was in those flowers. So they're really cute. I found a dead one, and they weighed nothing. They're like absolutely like a moth, basically. Incredible how light they are. I think their bones are hollow. So in the desert, every once in a while, Jack probably knows this from his years in Tucson, saguaro cactus, and it blooms. So cactus actually has flowers. That's something we normally think of when we think of a cactus. We just saw this last spring. So plants provide habitat. This is actually at Mariana's old place. This is like really zoomed in, but when you're looking at it from a distance, you can't even see it. There's a little frog there in that leaf. And I had to really look closely to see it. But, plants are very important for other creatures, including humans. That's at Golden Gardens. But there's a grove of trees there. It's really interesting, right by the sand.
By the water, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, we usually meet there and practice music.
Oh, is that right?
At night, yeah, until the cops kick us out.
Oh, of course, yeah. They have to do their job in protecting us from ourselves. They wouldn't want people to enjoy the park too much. So, plants provide habitat along with food. So an important thing to think about with plants is where they grow, and they grow in soil. And I always found this fascinating that the structure of the soil is very important. This is a very dumbed down slide. It's actually much more complicated than this, but you see the circle on the left is well-structured soil. You see how big the soil particles are, and there's lots of space in between the soil. And that is really important because there has to be both air and water along with the mineral components of the soil. So you see the blue there is water, and there'll be air in there as well, oxygen. And it's very important for the plants. If it's packed down like the one on the right, or even worse, where there's no porosity at all, there's no place for the roots to go. So soil structure is very important. It gets very complicated in a hurry, and I'm going to keep myself from going down each of these rabbit holes because I know that this is probably not. This is a more general audience than horticulturally. But feel free to ask questions if you're dying to know something, because I know everything there is to know about this. Kidding. Thank you. Thank you for the laugh. Roots have root hairs, and this is how the stuff gets into the roots. And so those have to go into that soil. So you can see why it's important to have spacing there. As you can see, the slide here is showing, it's kind of like, it looks like, almost like it's all in water with a few mineral things around. It's not quite that way, but for the plant it is. It's very important because, of course, the number one thing they need is water. And then they need a certain amount of oxygen, and then the minerals that they're going to take in from the soil and the nutrients. So the root hairs help them pick it up, and you can see on the slide on the right, it gets into chemistry in a hurry, and you start having negative ions and positive ions and all this kind of thing to attract various chemicals to from the soil particle to the root hair that transpires into the plant itself, translocates into the plant. So this is kind of like a microscopic view of how plants actually survive, how they live. If you look to the left there, you can see that that's a blown up picture of of what's actually going on, just a typical root hair, root end of a plant. So this time of the year, everywhere you walk, there's falling leaves. And perhaps it's never occurred to you, why and how does the plant decide to jettison its leaves at the end of the year, at the end of the summer? After all, it needs the leaves for photosynthesis. But deciduous trees, as a process of regeneration, which is very akin to what humans do, jettisons all of the plant material that had grown for photosynthesis in that year. And the process is done through hormones which go into the plant. Auxin is a very important hormone for plant growth. And at the end of the year, all the auxin, which caused that leaf to turn into from a bud into a leaf and grow, it all goes out of the leaf. And without auxin in the leaf, then ethylene becomes an important aspect, and it triggers a little layer there between where the leaf attaches to the branch, and then the leaf has nowhere to abide, and so it basically just falls off on its own. So it's sort of interesting to think about this, and this is something that we can think about for ourselves in terms of shedding things that aren't necessary. Some things that we really liked at one point in our lives, they really served us, were really important. We couldn't have lived without them, but then at a certain point, they're not serving us anymore, and we can just let them go. Plants are very kind of, what's the word, unemotional about things. When it's time for that stuff to happen, it happens, and it happens very quickly, and it's done. And then the tree is ready to go through the winter. There's a lot of reasons why it's good for trees not to have leaves in the winter. So it's evolved through evolution to be the case that they should, and this is exactly how they do it. So this is an interesting thing that actually, when I was going to horticulture school in the late 80s, early 90s, they had, it had been previous, if you look at the right-hand branch there, previous to the way they used to prune, was you would just cut you'd make pretty much parallel to the trunk, a cut that would go straight down. And then they'd put some goop over it. They'd put tar or something like that over it. And that was supposed to be what the plant liked. But somebody noticed that they had this little ridge that went off, and they would notice that what dead branches do when the tree dies, it naturally forms a little layer there. And there's actually a collar. So there's a really good place to prune the branch that would be just like what the tree would want you to do. But it wasn't until somebody, actually, only a few decades ago noticed that there's this decided place where it's really great to prune a tree, and the way they were doing it in the past, and particularly putting stuff on the cut afterwards, was really bad for the tree, because the tree was going to take care of all of the of sealing off that area that was cut on its own, You had all these natural ways of doing that to prevent insects and disease from coming into the tree itself. So that had all evolved over time. So this is sort of an important, it's a little bit esoteric, but an important aspect of arboriculture, which is the care for trees. So a very important part of plants that's different than what humans and other animals have, because plants, after all, are in the ground, right? So they're not going to go anywhere. As such, the way they get their nutrients, we already saw how they get their nutrients out of the soil. And this is through a process called transpiration, translocation, where things are moved throughout the plant. It's under incredible pressure. They're very, very fine tubes that run up the plant and run down the plant. They're unbelievably tiny, much, much smaller than a hair, like many times smaller. And they generate enough pressure to allow stuff to go, like imagine like a 200-foot tree. How in the world does all that stuff get all the way up to the top of a 200-foot tree? Well, they don't exactly know. They think capillary attraction is important and osmotic pressure and a few other things like that. But honestly, it's a mystery at this point. It's just something that trees and shrubs and plants can do. And that's to move stuff that's good in terms of water, minerals and such up into the leaves, and then to send carbohydrates, right, and so forth down into the roots, which is stored as food. So very important aspect of tree biology or plant biology. How do they reproduce? Sexy flowers. Andrew with his funny captions. So anyway, it's a very simple process actually. It's not unlike how other animals reproduce. There's a pollen grain which needs to go into the ovary of the plant. And so you see a flower there, and what you don't notice is that there's what's called a stigma at the top, the pistil, and then or the style. The pistil is actually the whole reproductive organ of the plant, and then the stigma is the very top, and so the pollen grains go into the very top and then go down into the ovary of the plant, and that produces seed, and then the seeds get spread by various means, and that's how the plants reproduce. How one flowering plant produces lots of seeds, which then go and then of course make more plants.
So does a plant produce pollen and the seed and the ovary at the same time? The same plant?
Mhm.
Which I think is
Yeah, but
fascinating.
typically they don't. Typically, it's like that's an awesome question. You probably couldn't hear that. Joe is asking if plants produce their own pollen and their own eggs, the same plant, and they can. Typically, it comes from others. There's what they call cross-fertilization, and that's where bees and
Right.
birds.
Because you'd think if it's producing both, it would just,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
right in there.
Yeah, it's kind of like incest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that they've designed themselves in a way that while they do both,
Right.
they still require this outside mechanism.
It's very
to-
true.
Just putting that out there.
No, it's very true. Well, for example, apples, in apple culture, it's really important that there be some sunny and hopefully windy days in the spring, when so the pollen gets blown around and gets into the different, so that they cross-pollinate, and bees and flies and other creatures will also carry the pollen. So yeah, great question. Okay, this is the last science slide, I promise. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of background. Hopefully it's not too boring. Just so you see how plants are different and probably maybe some things you hadn't thought about. So this is the evolution of a seed into a sprouting plant. And as you can see, the seed there, it's the first one. And it has what's called a radicle. It's a little piece that comes off of the seed, and then it goes down into the ground, and it starts to develop a root structure. And then it lifts the seed up out of the ground, which is obviously very important. And then it starts to develop the upper part of the plant, which is the leaves, the stem, the leaves, trunk, whatever it's going to be, down the line. And then it jettisons the seed casing. So anyway, that's how the seed turns into a baby plant, which I've always thought was kind of interesting. It's kind of cool the way they do that. They show, you can see these time-lapse photos where they do this. It actually happens fairly quickly. Maybe 2 or 3 days. Definitely not more than 2 weeks. Okay, we're going to shift gears. So this is from the Tao Te Ching. Listen to the voice of the valley spirit. Hear it echo throughout creation. Without fail, she reveals her presence. Without fail, she brings us to our own perfection. And I love this drawing here. It shows how we're part of nature, and nature is part of us. We're not separate anyway. That the forces that are going on in plants or in other fellow creatures is also going on in us as well. So we have this kind of symbiosis, and there's not a separation between us and the rest of the world. Between any aspect of the world, we all had lunch today. We were eating aspects of that plant world around us, maybe the animal world as well, who knows? And so we're bringing those into our own physical bodies. So water, air, we're breathing right now. All these things are happening as we're sitting here. And as we go through our day, we tend to forget that. We get locked into we start getting locked into our own little patterns, and we start asking questions like, how do we find happiness? That's what we talked about this morning. Instead of just being happy, because why not? We have to invent reasons not to be happy. When you think about it, we're pretty lucky to be alive. So real quick, everybody knows this one. I pull it out every time because I never want people to forget. These are the fields of our own existence. This is what we are. This is our true nature. And the little dot at the bottom there, the Annamaya Kosha, is our physical body. So that's us right here. And look how teensy it is. It's just teensy tiny. And then around us is prana, pranic energy, our auras and so forth, chakras, all that. And then beyond that, the Manomaya koshas are mental field, intellect, and so forth. And beyond that, the Jnanamaya koshas is intelligence. Now, this is the intelligence that we also share with those plants. We're seeing how the seed germinates into a plant, or how they pollinate, and all these different things, all the different aspects of how a plant works. Well, these all require, inside of our own body right now, there's all kinds of like white blood cells that are fighting invaders and that kind of stuff. That all requires intelligence. It requires a certain amount of intelligence to be carried on. And so we share this intelligence with all creatures. That's why that circle's so big, because we're all part of that in a way. And then beyond that is Anandamaya Kosha, which is bliss. And that's pure bliss of being. When you have this idea of enlightenment, that essentially is when their mental, the Manomaya Kosha is infused with that Anandamaya Kosha, and you have that bliss that is our true birthright, becomes our own, instead of our own little squirrel cage running around mind, figuring out stuff all the time. Figuring out stuff that's going to help us, and actually it's just keeping us busy for no particular reason. So I wanted to talk, just to bring in the I Ching. We just did, Athena did a spectacular job on her I Ching workshop today. It was brilliant, honestly, very brilliant. And that when to realize that what the I Ching looked at is the same thing as Athena mentioned this morning. Fuxi looked around and saw all of the different signs in nature, and said, you saw the water, and said, I'll read this thing. It says, there are so many ways to look at our lives and what we do. What the I Ching does is give us a concise window to look through. With a clear focus, we can expand our awareness. Then we move to a vaster perspective. We tend to think of ourselves as in isolation. when we do think it's us, then there's the world out there. Separated from our environment, we think of ourselves as these figures existing in space. Actually, we are held close by the earth with our minds of sky, bodies of fire and water, still like mountain and lake, or moving like wind and thunder. So what the I Ching does, and we'll be looking at this a little bit as we go along, is it sees how these patterns of nature can correspond to patterns within ourselves. Let's see, Mark's an old I Chinger from way back. Remember back in the day, the good old days, right, Mark? So anyway, we'll be looking at that a little bit more. I'm not going to do a hard deep dive into any of these really more philosophical things, but more just to kind of give you an essence of that as we go along. See how we are infused with this essence. There you go. Like that lady.
Yeah.
Ansel was asking me about the ladies. These are the protectors. This is one of the protectors that we use in the Tao Te Ching talks. So I found that. I put that on there for Ansel. So Krishnamurti said, if we do not know reality, the unknown, how can, let's see, if I do not know reality, the unknown, how can I search for it? Surely it must come, but I cannot go after it. If I go after it, I am going after something which is known, projected by me, by my own mind. This is a crucial point. It sounds very simple, but it's actually kind of hard to implement in reality as we're doing our sort of spiritual, whatever we're doing. So it's the idea that we allow the unknown to be there. We talked about this a bit this morning. So I'm very fascinated with that. Not only the unknown, but the unknowable. So, anybody know where this is? East Siders?
Sammamish?
The Sammamish Slough.
Yay! Winner. Good job, Mark. Somebody else also said that?
Yep.
Very good. So anyway, I took this picture when I was trying out my new iPhone, or my new Android phone. So now we got to switch gears here. So end thing. And so feel free to. Oh, yeah. I know Mariana always shows me that too. It just seems so easy to do it that way. Okay, so this one. So now we're going to switch over to a more philosophical aspect of things, but we're not going to get too far away from nature. Trust me. Anyway, I want to talk about an important concept. This is very important in Taoism, also important in Zen, which is where this is from. Shizen or Zhirun in Chinese is naturalness, and that's just being nature in human form. Not being humans in human form, being natural. Absence of pretense or artificiality, full creative intent, unforced. Ironically, the spontaneous nature of the Japanese garden, which is what we're going to be looking at, that the viewer perceives is not accidental. This is a reminder that design is not an accident, even when we are trying to create a natural feeling environment. It is not a raw nature as such, but one with more purpose and intention. The goal of Shizen is to strike a balance between being of nature, yet distinct from it, to be viewed as being without pretense or artifice, while seeming intentional rather than accidental or haphazard. I would actually amend that a little bit, because it's okay if it looks accidental or haphazard. The important thing is that it conformed with nature to the degree to which human intervention can allow that to happen. So here we are again. Okay, I just put this in here because I thought that slide looked cool. So, everybody been to the Japanese garden? Who hasn't been? Raise your hand. I can't, no hands. Okay, great. Everybody's been there. This actually is date stamped from a camera I had in 2010. So I know that it was November 2nd, 2010. So we're going to talk about a few Zen qualities and maybe see them being manifested in Japanese gardens. So the qualities are the one we just talked about: naturalness, asymmetry or irregularity, subtlety, stillness and tranquility, austerity, and simplicity or elimination of clutter. So these are things to be thinking about. So now what we're doing is we're going between the natural world and the human mind. The human mind has a certain need to see things a certain way, right? We all, when we arrange a room, we all arrange it according to what we worked in. A lot of these principles will be in play while we're doing that. So imagine that now you're creating a garden that people are going to be walking through and trying to become calm and tranquil and quiet and all of that. You want to create an environment that has these qualities, and then hopefully that can translate into the human mind. So people have heard the word sabi before. It's fairly common now. Sabi-shi-sa. Lonely beauty, cherish. Basho is the person who invented haiku. School of Haikai. I'm going to do a talk on haiku. Elements of sadness, old age, resignation, tranquility, and even happiness can be found in it. Underlying this aesthetic is a cosmic view typical of medieval Buddhists who recognized man's existential loneliness and accepted it with calm resignation. And it's interesting they say old age there, because that's something that when I was doing these talks 20 or 30 years ago, I wouldn't have even thought about. And I understand now more why that was thrown in there, because as you get older, it's kind of a resignation, but it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's not fighting nature. It's not fighting the natural events of things, the way things are meant to be.
So Andrew,
Yeah.
then there's that famous Japanese circle that's called wabi sabi.
Yes. Great. Exactly. Well, the next one is
Wabi.
right. Exactly. So, and this is, I'll just read it. Aesthetic and moral principle advocating a leisurely life free from worldly concerns, spiritual wealth and material poverty, and luxuriate in the beauty of things modest and simple. Derived from wabu, which means to languish, and wabishi, which means lonely. So it's, again, it's the same sort of thing. Same idea, if you read the Tao Te Ching, pretty much every chapter is talking about this exact thing. It's this idea that, I don't know about leisurely life per se, but just a life free of worldly concerns, or life less concerned with worldly matters. So there's my first slide. I love this picture. The one thing I love more than anything else in this picture, I love the rock in the middle of the little lake there, the mini lake, and I love the lantern over there to the right. Actually, there's two lanterns to the right there, if you can see. But the thing I always like, it's in its full majesty, is that ginkgo tree, which is a bright yellow in the back there. And it's actually, since that's like 12 years ago, it's about twice that big now. And it's just like the king of the whole area now.
Is that a Japanese maple?
No, it's a ginkgo. Ginkgo biloba. Okay. There are some Japanese maples. There's pretty much anything you see that's orange, yellow, or red, other than the ginkgo, is going to be a Japanese maple. So you can see a lot of elements in this in just this one thing. For example, look at the reflection. It's not necessarily the first thing that jumps out at you, but then when you see it, it's kind of cool. And then you have what's transposed in front of it. They tend to shape the some of the shrubs into kind of round shapes. Those are supposed to look like clouds. And I actually worked with a Japanese gardener when I was training in horticulture. And it's a very rigorous thing. It's not a easygoing thing at all, almost militaristic. But the idea is that if you look at those pines in the distance there underneath the ginkgo, you see how they're kind of like horizontal layers. You see how they almost look like clouds in the sky. So Yugen is my favorite of these aesthetics, and so that's why I gave it its own special slide. It's a beauty of mystery and depth, often in sadness, combined with other effects such as elegance, refinement, ambiguity, darkness, calm, ephemerality. The relative proportions of these ingredients differed from the different poets and artists who cultivated this ideal, roughly from the 12th to the 15th century. This is in Japan. And I guess I'm going to do a haiku talk. That's I think in the next one. I'm going to talk a lot about this stuff because it's really cool. Because now in haiku, you're talking about words, and the words are very, very carefully chosen. They're like, you spend hours thinking of a particular word. But they all come from nature. So it's ways of seeing this the way our mind is part of nature, and nature is part of our mind. There's nothing in nature that we don't, see in our mind. It's not possible to experience anything about the world without using our minds. So asymmetry, that's all over the place in Japanese gardens. Almost nothing is symmetrical other than the lanterns and so forth. But things are deliberately, like the tree, you see the pine there above the rock, a little to the right. That's deliberately planted that way to look like a windswept tree that's, say hanging on a cliffside down in Big Sur or someplace like that. So this asymmetry is a very important thing, and it's kind of against, if you look at English and French gardening, it's all very symmetrical and very geometrical. Whereas I imagine to those landscape designers, this would look very haphazard and random, but it's actually very carefully controlled to have that certain look. Simplicity. So instead of making a bridge or pouring some concrete, why don't we just put some rocks across there, across the little stream? And so everything is done with an idea of economy of materials and not necessarily effort. It's not an economy of effort. It takes a lot of effort to do this in the correct way so that it looks nice. There's a certain way that those rocks look good, and there's a certain way where they look kind of funny, out of order. And the problem with nature does everything perfectly, but humans trying to imitate nature have to really be careful, because there's never been such a thing as a poorly formed wave or poorly formed cloud. But if you're trying to draw one, you can mess it up easily if anybody's ever tried to do those things. So it takes a lot of skill to place those rocks just exactly that way, but to make it look very simple. Yeah, you can see the date stamp at the bottom of that, 11/2/2010. Okay, stillness and tranquility. It's not shifting yet. Here we go. Again, there's the still pond. Nature reflected perfectly, like a mirror. And creating that sense of stillness, creating that sense of tranquility. Austerity. This is when austerity is probably kind of a little harsh term. We tend to think of like Mennonites or some kind of very Luddite type severe person, but it's more a sense of just what is needed and nothing more. And so again, we have the rocks going across, forming a little bridge, some plants. Now look how carefully that ginkgo tree shows up as you're walking across. You see a beautiful reflection of the ginkgo as you're going across your pond there. If you're looking, if you're not just trying to walk across. You're taking your time and you see things like that that kind of pop into view. So this is from the Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching. A giant tree grows from the tiniest root. A great tower rises from a basket of dirt. A 1,000-mile journey begins at your feet, but to act is to fail. Okay? To act is to fail. To control is to lose. Therefore, the sage doesn't act. He thus doesn't fail. He doesn't control. He thus doesn't lose. So that might take a bit of digesting, but people have been involved in learning and studying the Lao Tzu and the other Taoist and Zen things will understand what they're getting at here. That guy's making the journey of 1,000 miles, but he can decide whether he wants to walk forward or backward or what he wants to do. Maybe he just wants to look at that really cool little gate. Mariano will remember that we were taking pictures at that gate a few weeks back. This is really nice arrangement. You can see all the different elements of the plants in the Japanese garden. You've got the kind of round shapes over there on the right. Pine, you've got the kind of cloud-like pines on the left, and then some nice deciduous maples going up, creating some nice interplay of colors and shapes. So you've got round shapes and more flowing shapes and verticals. So all kinds of, and you've got the lantern with the lamp actually with the gate there, with that cool roof on it, and then a person, nicely placed. You didn't even know it. So I just put this in here to show. Look how clear that water is. This is what I talk about whenever I lead meditations. I'm sure it's very familiar to everybody that I always say this: a clear mind reflects nature as it is. So all the trees look in the pond just exactly like they look in the distance there. So our minds can be like that too. Now, if there's a bunch of wind blowing, then you wouldn't see anything there. It would just be ruffled water. There wouldn't be any reflection at all. And that's like our minds when we're all busy thinking about things and we're not calm. We're anxious. We're either emotionally troubled or intellectually troubled or troubled with different problems in the world. But when our minds are calm and clear, then we see nature just like this pond. So, okay, this is, oh, I can't quite read that. It looks like I messed up the slide. This is about the sages, and this is chapter 15, I believe. And so it says, their depth goes beyond all. Thus, despite every effort, we know them only by their outer signs. This is a sage or somebody, a true mystic, as opposed to the ones that call themselves mystics, so they can make money. They are deliberate, as if treading over the stones of a winter brook, watchful, as if meeting danger on all sides, reverent, as if meeting an honored guest. When one translation has as kindly as a grandmother, like that. Reverent, as if meeting an honored guest. Selfless, like a block of melting ice. Pure, like a block of uncarved wood. Accepting, like an open valley. Through the course of nature, muddy water becomes clear. Through the unfolding of life, man reaches perfection. Through sustained activity, supreme rest is found. Those that have Tao want nothing else. Though seemingly empty, they are ever full. Though seemingly old, they are beyond the reach of birth and death. Okay. I put that on. I accidentally put that on upside down and thought that's perfect.
Mm.
The water becomes clear only if you don't disturb it. That's a nice, just from a technical point of view, that's a nice, shows the bridges, the way they construct the bridges. The bridges are always going back and forth. They don't go straight for very long. They go straight and then they'll churn and go a different direction. They want, the idea is to make folks when they're walking not try to get from one place to the other as fast as possible. But yeah, you see the elements of the trees and the maples and the lanterns and the rocks, kind of dry stones and lots of stuff going on there. It seems like a busy picture, doesn't it? It seems like a lot of stuff going on, but it actually is calming in a strange way.
Most of the painting, if people could paint that well.
What's that?
I said it was like a painting if people could paint that well.
Yes. Okay, that's going in the wrong direction. A mind free of thought merges and merged with itself beholds the essence of the Tao. So this idea of being free of thought merged with itself is, it's tricky. It's not not lightly said. A mind filled with thought and identified with its own perceptions beholds mere forms of this world. The Tao and this world seem different, but in truth they are one and the same. The only difference is in what we call them. So the idea of holding the mere forms of this world, what that is we are categorizing the world. We see chairs and lamps and floor and carpets and all that. These are forms of the world. That's not the essence of this world. So that's just the different names we've called things. So we're breaking the world up into things. No wonder that we can't feel a sense of harmony or unity with the world. So they're all the same thing, just in different shapes and forms. So that's why it says the only difference is in what we call them. So there's a walkway, a bridge on the left. Yeah. Real pretty maple there. Doing its thing. I don't think I'm even going to try to read that slide. I don't know what happened there. Hopefully the rest of them aren't like that. So there's the salient point in all that I just passed. All things move as the wind blows. So this is actually a great photo to show the different forms of Japanese gardening. You see, you notice how the trees are often leaning one way or the other. They're hardly ever straight. There's a beautiful willow on the left. That willow's, everybody wants to take a picture over there to the left. I didn't include one of those, but there's a little pavilion over there, and then you look through the willow leaves. It's really pretty. And again, notice the reflection. Notice how the reflection enhances what's there, and water just by itself really fills it out even more. Makes it even more beautiful. Let's see, we were talking about this on Thursday. Jack and Barb can remember. Let's see, so before I'd studied Zen for 30 years, I saw mountains as mountains and waters as waters. When I arrived at a more intimate knowledge, I came to the point where I saw that mountains are not mountains, waters are not waters. But now that I've got its very substance, I am at rest. For it is just that I see that mountains once again as mountains and waters once again as waters. So this is a subtle thing. There's a long discussion about this, and so I'm not going to go over that. I imagine people know this. There's a Donovan. You're talking about a Donovan song. There's another Donovan song about this, that verse. If you're interested, I'll find it. Athena was remembering the Donovan song. Some of us of a certain age will remember, called "Happiness Runs in a Circular Motion." You guys remember that song? I was surprised Athena knew it, being a mere child.
I know it.
So there, it's almost hard to tell what's reflection and what's real, what's the actual thing, that particular picture. That was a really special day. The light was quite amazing. I remember that it was really, really cold, November 2nd. And I was just driving by the Japanese garden and thought, oh, what the heck, I'll stop and go in there. I'm really glad that I did. It was kind of one of those things I remembered ever since then, whenever I stopped, and I'm too busy to do that. It's like, well, yeah, but there was that time I went to the Japanese garden and then I remember maybe I should have stopped. Okay. We know. You want to read that, Ansel?
You can see that.
Ansel's a Wayne fan.
The whole thing. Okay. Huineng, Enlightenment in the Diamond Sutra, 5th Patriarch, Wei Zhen, Guonin, or Conan, 601 to 674, signed Huineng, to go to his chamber at the 3rd watch in the evening. When the two were face to face in the stillness of the night, the patriarch expounded the Diamond Sutra to his disciples. When he came to the sentence, "Keep your mind alive and free without abiding in anything or anywhere," Huineng was suddenly and thoroughly enlightened. The Golden Age of Zen, page 62. Keep your mind alive and free without abiding in anything or anywhere. Paramita Sutra. To awaken the mind without fixing it anywhere. Essays in Zen Buddhism. How'd I do, Andrew?
Great. And so doing a deep dive into Buddhism and Zen, both Zen and Tibetan Buddhism, in a way that none of us can even imagine. It's really cool. Hearing about it, really, it's inspiring and exciting. So there's an aesthetic in Chinese watercolors and ink drawings where humans are drawn in very small, very small relative to the rest of the environment. Whereas in Western, the human would be the important thing, and the background would be, would be small. It would just be there'd be kind of a faint, fuzzy background, and then the humans would be big, like this couple here. They'd be standing up there, and then you'd have maybe a few little trees or something. But it's interesting when you go and actually go to a Japanese garden, that's exactly how you would draw it. If you were going to draw a lifelike picture of of people in nature. So so the man of Tao, like clear stillness of autumn water, pure and without activity, in his tranquil depths are no obstructions. Such a one is called man of Tao, also man who has nothing further to do. I think that's the last picture. So nothing further to do, I guess. Oh, what do you know? Darn it. So Andrew had a bunch of ideas. So I thought I'd go through this. This is just something that I actually wrote down last week. And it's not anything particularly profound, but I thought it was sort of interesting and in keeping with our talk. So this is talking about the spectrum of the senses, which is how we perceive the world. And this is the plant edition. So the sense of touch is the most intimate sense, the most connected and indistinguishable from form. The body itself, correspondence with object to some degree. And then I was thinking of feeling grass, feeling roughly in grass in the spring, or mimosa, the sensitive plants, the ones you touch and their leaves curl up, or a cactus. So you think about the sense of touch for a second, how we interact with the world through touch. or the sense of taste. I call that the contact with the future body, the process of assimilating the surrounding environment into one's own body. So when we taste something, we're going to see if we want to eat it. If when you take a swig of sour milk or moldy raspberries or something like that, you won't eat it. So it's kind of like, it's like how we decide, you know, whether we want that thing that we have in our hands to become part of our body. It's no less than that. It's exactly what's going on. Sense of taste is something. That's how we human Homo sapiens survived to this point, by developing a good sense of taste. Now we eat garbage all the time, but it doesn't kill us quickly. It just kills us slowly. McDonald's and so forth. So fragrance, I'm calling that the most subtle contact with the environment, where one inhales molecules of the surrounding environment, but the thing being sensed remains mostly intact. Speaking of flower, or pine tree, you know, anything we really sense, incense, anything like that. We're actual molecules of that thing, when we can smell it, are actually coming to whatever it is. And it might be molecules of poop or something, you know, whatever it is. It's like, that's something we're actually noticing, because in essence of that is coming off, and we are detecting it. I think fragrance is something, or the sense of smell is something that's kind of overlooked a lot, and very important. It's very nostalgic for me. So many different things I smell remind me of things in the past. The sense of sight, that's the most complicated one. I think over half of our brain is devoted to sight, to processing, you know, visual sensations. It's what keeps us alive, I think, honestly. Get right down to it. The most abstract sense, where nothing of the object of sensation is actually internalized, yet a tremendous amount of information is conveyed nevertheless, no correspondence with the subject. So like looking at a forest, in the leaves, whatever. So we're internalizing photons, right? Photons are hitting our retinas, and then the retinas are getting transmitted that into a signal which goes into the brain, which tells us what that thing is. So it's all this translating going on from the thing that we're looking at. So that's why I call it the most abstract sense, because I think that it's probably the most easy to fool somebody with it. Hearing, the sympathetic resonance between object and subject. So registering vibration on eardrum. So for example, in a world without eardrums, there would be no sound of a tree falling. The eardrum is specifically designed to capture sound. And so if there's no thing there that can capture sound, then there's not going to be a sound by definition. Sound is actually the capturing of a crash, or whatever, splash, or whatever it is. So I was thinking of leaves rustling in the wind, or you could think of 1,000 different things, sounds we hear, somebody driving down the street with their boombox, whatever it is. So hearing is the resonance between object and subject. So speech, the manipulation of sound to represent and project thought. I think that's pretty self-evident. Thought. Now, again, these are ideas, and I'm happy to have you guys, we can talk about any of these things you want. I just want to kind of put this out here. So thought is the modeling of the external and internal world for the purpose of analysis and interaction. Think about that. So subjectivity and objectivity senses, which senses are more objective and which are more subjective.